Mark, why are you this passive?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been trying for the last couple of weeks since we did the red line. It's been on my mind, and I've been monitoring my red line a lot. But I'm obviously not, I'm obviously missing something. So I'm looking forward to digging into it today, because it's the root. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is the root of why I'm now bumbling along. We've stemmed the bleed, and as you can see in the chart, the second half is the period of this coaching. So
we focus in on that yellow line. Look at this yellow line from about 50k hands, like in the last 50k. Is that winning ever so slightly? I think it might actually be microscopically winning. Maybe we can even claim to be like cruising in the way that like a piece of driftwood like cruises in a direction but very slowly and sort of, aimlessly, but still in the right direction. Maybe I can make that argument. But yeah, that red line is just, it's too much. You are too passive. And there was a guy or girl in the comment section the other day, and they went on 2 of our videos. I don't know if you saw. And they would just like, Mark is such a passive nit, like on 2 videos.
Yeah, they called me a nit. Yeah, I saw that. And that's the first time I've been called a nit. But I get it. Yeah, I do get it.
Sympathy for the trolls. Troll empathy. That's what we're all about here at Carrot Corner. But I love how you took that feedback. You're just like, fair point, mate. I am too passive. I am a nit, I guess. But he was basically like, this guy's so nitty, he's never gonna win unless he stops being so nitty. And he's basically kind of echoing what I'm saying, right? It is true that I think the problem here is general one. It's a psychological one, and it's maybe an application one. Like, I know in theory, if you had like an exam to set, I don't think your answers to the exam would be overly passive. Like, I don't think you would look like a really passive poker player in some kind of survey where you could just sit down and tick boxes. But for whatever reason, when you're at the tables, when you're grinding, when you're playing, you are clicking the passive buttons really automatically and without really much cognition sometimes, I think. Or maybe there's a bias. Maybe that's not fair, but maybe there's a bias of some sort there, which we need to identify. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it may be that there's a bias, because there are times when I know I can bet or check, and I think I probably have a bias towards check. So maybe I need to RNG more. I don't more RNG that much. So that maybe this is something where I need to actually apply an RNG and be rigorous about it.
So maybe in some of those spots, it's not even that you should use an RNG. Maybe it's that betting is actually better than checking. I think an RNG would improve things because it would take some of the checking mistakes and turn them into bets. But would it not be better to try to like engage with why bet could actually be superior in terms of true EV? Wouldn't it?
Yeah, no. Sorry, I'm just trying to get over that. Yeah.
It's even worse for Mark, guys.
I've never seen it live. It's the first time I've seen it live.
It looks like I've got some rare neurological condition, maybe. On that happy note, let's dig into some spots and figure out where you're taking the passive line and why you are so passive. Let's get into some hands. All right, first time we're going to look at today is Jack 9 folds to us in the small blind. And we go ahead and raise 3x. We pick up a call. We get a flop of 6-6-3. We see bet small on flop. We pick up a call. And then the 9 turn comes. What are your general thoughts in this spot?
My general thoughts are that the call has a condensed villains range, and I still have a range that has a fair bit of air in it. So when the 9 hits, I think that's a good card for my range, because I don't think he's calling any 9x. But my instinct here is to check and pot control.
Okay, so I think that instinct that you vocalized there, I'm really glad that you vocalized it, because I think it's absolutely the culprit. Yeah. Pot control is taking too much precedence. It's almost like your brain is more drawn to keeping pots smaller and trying to avoid big losses in some way than it is drawn to value betting.
Yeah.
Now, if this is a good card for your range, how should you be playing strategically? Like, if we start in the more theoretical realm here before we get to any exploits.
I should be betting more often.
Okay, so you should definitely be, in game theory, value betting many hands here. Pairs over pairs, 9x, pocket pair, 6x, that sort of thing as a value region. And I guess you could just use like B75 or something here in the paired board. That would be normal. You could build a block bet as well if you wanted. And then you'd be finding some bluffs as well, and you'd be betting this turn, I agree, like quite a high frequency of the time. Obviously looking to slow play sometimes. But in game theory, this hand is going to be a frequent bet. It's going to be a big hand. It blocks some of the outs of diamonds, meaning that they have less equity. That's a very small point. The main point is just that you have a pair of 9s when the flop was blank, so you essentially have the best hand unless villain has a 6, which means that you have like 80% equity, but most of that 20% that villain has doesn't come from having a 6, it just comes from like having a draw that's live against you. If villain is like a passive fish here, I actually think it's really important to keep value betting. If they are more aggressive, then you can check, but you shouldn't be defaulting to check. You should be defaulting to having a very high bet frequency with this hand if you're trying to play a theoretical strategy. And if you're trying to play exploitatively, well, then you need to ask yourself, is someone with a filtered range here really going to over-aggress after they've already condensed, as you've said? Like, people can over-aggress, they can over-bluff, but the main time, in my experience and also according to mass data, where people tend to over-bluff is where they have an unfiltered range, and we actually talk about this in one of the points of cash injection. That's now the official meme for cash injection, which is a series all about boosting your win rate considerably. It's coming out on Carrot Corner on the 16th of December. Don't forget to check it out on the website when it does. But we talk about this, about how important it is to understand whether your opponent's range is filtered or not. And here, because they've called the flop, a lot of the natural air hands are going to be gone, and many of the hands are going to bluff with here. Note that I'm actually not thinking about pot control. That's the last thing in my mind. I'm actually thinking about, well, how do I make sure that I get maximum value? That's all I'm thinking about, whereas you're starting from this very much like glass half empty pessimism of I want to control how much money goes in the pot. So you're missing value in tons and tons of spots. And you might say, well, hang on a minute, Pete. Isn't missing value a blue line problem? Isn't it a one at showdown problem if I'm not value betting enough and not winning enough? Yes, but it's manifested also in the red line, because if you don't bet, you don't make people fold, and then your red line doesn't gain. So it's kind of the red line is symptomatic of this kind of not winning enough by value betting problem. In a weird paradoxical way, that's what's happening here. So to summarize this, you have a very large equity hand in a wide range configuration that's capable of getting 3 streets of value easily. Against passive players, you will blunder by not betting here. Against aggressive players, you will be able to check for sure. But against an unknown at these stakes in this pool, I would definitely bet, because I think it's actually likely to be higher EV based on the fact that they've filtered away from total air, and many of the bets they will make here as a bluff will be hands they will call a bet with anyway. But the biggest shift you need to make here is moving away from the idea of pot control and damage limitation when you have a hand that has really high equity, and towards a greedy, value-seeking, wanting to get paid mentality. You're like hiding under a rock here when actually you need to be going out and like hunting. That's what's going on. You actually have the tools to hunt resources with this hand, but you instead are trying to preserve yourself instead of going on the offensive here.
Yeah, there's another element to this that I would that I think is probably important to vocalize. I would Queen 9, King 9, Ace 9, I would bet here, and it's the lower 9x that I would not bet. And
hang on. Contradiction, objection, Your Honor. You said villain doesn't have any 9x. Your words when he calls the flop.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Then absolutely. Why would King 9 or Ace 9 be different to Jack 9 if that was your read?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, so it's a bias. Yeah. It's like an arbitrary line in the sand. Okay.
But that is an element of it. So it's not that I'm checking all the time with a 9 here. It's the lower 9. It's the lower kicker 9s. That it's a habit of of pot controlling with those types of pairs. That's the issue.
It makes a lot of sense. Sometimes we have these triggers that just lead to behavior, even if there's not like a logical connection. It's just like I see trigger, I exhibit behavior, and then it gets ritualized and ingrained, doesn't it? It gets habitualized. So what happens here is that we need to basically say, first off, villain does have 9x because there's lots of 9x that calls flop clubs. Offsuit 9s with a club. Ace 9 is not a fold on the flop. 9-8 backdoor is not a fold on the flop. There's loads of 9s here. So first off, that's way too black and white to say he doesn't have 9x. But the problem is that he doesn't have it very often. And many of the 9x does fold on the flop, like Queen 9 of hearts, etc. So I think it does matter which 9 you have, but any 9 is pretty damn good here, is the idea. When you turn top pair in a wide range configuration on a low board, you just have a very big hand. And your first thought, I really want you to work hard this week, that your first thought becomes value in these spots, that you stop prioritizing damage limitation and start prioritizing the greedy accumulation of extra money from your opponent's stack. Okay? Even if it ends up like you're pure betting in spots where you wouldn't, because you play in a passive pool, you're leaving so much money on the table by not betting this sort of spot. I know in theory you can check sometimes, but now we check call, probably it goes check, check. They have a hand that can call 3. That's the issue. Okay, here they bet. All right, the other thing we did discuss last time was like, well, we've discussed many times is like whether to bluff catch, whether not to bluff catch. Any thoughts on that particular spot? Because I do think this is kind of linked to red line as well, like bluff catching in the right spots, effectively.
In terms of this particular spot?
Yeah. Let's get your thoughts on this one.
I think in this spot, I don't know what the villain is, but whether I had any particular read, but I think in general, on these low boards, I know it's a wide configuration, albeit they have filtered on the flop, but they could have a lot of over cards that they could be bluffing on the river.
And actually,
I think
what you knew at the time was that villain was a 53-29 from the HUD. If you've sent me all the hands in your database, then we know that their range is too wide pre. We know about origin theorem, the idea from grade E of the Carrot Poker School, of course, that may come your way. Big exploitative course that may come your way sometime in 2023, but it basically said that when you have an origin range that's too wide, which is a weaker player defending out of the big blind and then calling flop probably again a bit too wide if it's a weaker player, then if you check the turn and face a bet from a range that's only partially filtered, and then the river kind of bricks, okay, yeah, 4-5 gets there, whatever. Not a big deal when villain is so wide. This is a really overbluffed note now. Absolutely really overbluffed. Villain is only meant to be bluffing 28% of the time, 27% of the time for the sizing. So if they go up to 33%, you're printing by calling. I think you'll win here half the time, something like that. Absolute no-brainer call. Not no-brainer, that's harsh, but hook, line, and sinker call against this wide range. If you fold here, and I have no idea what you do, if you fold here, this is another example of like red line issues, because this is money that your blue line should be taking the hit here, not your red line, because you're winning more than you need to.
Yeah.
So let's have a countdown. 5. We called. We got that one right. Got him, boys. Nice. So you got that one right on the river. But then again, like, did you really pot control? Like, no, villain made 2 big bets. So your check was okay on the turn against that particular aggressive player. Oh, I didn't even see what they had. I get told off when that happens. So your check was okay on the turn against that particular aggressive player. The proof is in the pudding. There you go. Random stuff. Shouldn't even be calling pre. Origin theorem at its best. Origin theorem, my friends. You heard it here first. Carrot Corner Poker Education. Origin theorem dictates this river call. I'm celebrating results like a fish, but you get the point. But the main idea there is that when you check the turn, you weren't pot controlling. Pot controlling would be like, oh, I'm going to fold later. I don't like this. I shouldn't invest much money. You were actually getting villain to invest really wide so that you could call and take their money. Yeah, so you don't gain EV by checking against aggros there to pot control. You take people's money. Get rid of pot control. In fact, let's have a ceremonial shredding of the term pot control. Shh. Rip it up. We're not having that. No more pot control. The term is trash. It should be in the banned list. It doesn't even make sense. I'm going to give you a tip. If you want to say pot control, I want you to ask yourself, are you making a polarization error by betting? And if the answer is yes, then you just check because it would be a polarization error to bet. And if it's no, there's no such thing as pot control. It's a completely redundant, archaic term, and it's best wielded by horrible poker players from 2003. Are you a horrible poker player from 2003, Mark?
No. I was, actually, at the time, yeah.
You played poker back then. You knew the rules of poker back then and stuff, yeah?
Yeah, I played, and I was terrible, so yeah.
I was terrible too.
That would make sense, yeah.
I played a lot of 5-card draw in 2003, anyway.
Yeah, I wish I knew someone who actually knew the game back then, I have to say.
Okay, so we open this one, we get 3-bet, there's a call, villain bets flop, and we go for the little click back here. Juicy stuff, Mark, juicy stuff. The click back.
That's not me. That's
sorry,
you. That is me. Sorry, okay.
You're like, I don't do that. That can't be me. It says it's you. So I don't actually mind these kind of plays usually, but again, like player type, no, like not against this. This is a 50-42, by the way, guys. Another maniac looking player. Early days though, small sample, but looks recreational. Sizing is also recreational. So this is another thing that's really hurting your red line. Another thing that's hurting your red line is the random inflation of pots in spots where people are reopening on you too often. I've seen this before. I don't want to like start telling you not to bet, because like not betting is actually the problem, but you are making too many random raises against the wrong player types in spots where people are rejamming, okay? So like if they have kings here, they're going to rejam on you all the time. And this is not a healthy situation. You can just call here. Totally fine. yeah, as played, I don't have a massive objection with the rest of this hand. Let's find another one. But yeah, be careful about that. We've talked about that before. All right. You know what these are called, guys? Tell us in the comments. What is this hand called?
Fucking potatoes.
Fucking potatoes!
I wasn't meant to say that.
It's a good accent, actually.
I've never heard that.
I made it up.
I made it up.
My friend Sam the Lamb Stock Mix calls them pocket tates, and that sounds a bit like tatties, which is like potatoes. Yeah. So that's why. So we go for the defend of the 3-bet. Ace, ace, 8 comes. Villain, of course, does this because that's what people do, and it's obviously the thing to do here. Betting range, I would imagine. We call. We could also raise. Small raise is fine here. Bit of thin sort of denial. Sometimes get called by worse. Some nits will fold like kings here. Like it's not terrible to raise here, but plain call only is probably the done thing. And villain checks. And this is the spot I really want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
So I want a theoretical assessment of whether you think this is optional, prohibited, or mandatory. This bet, right? That's our framework in Carrot Poker School. You can check Carrot Poker School out on carrotcorner.com. It's a massive, gargantuan, colossal theoretical course. Check it out. One of the things we talk about in grade 1 lecture 2 is the idea of a mandatory, prohibited, or optional value bet. So I want you to tell me which one this is, and then for bonus points, let's take your thought process on a more exploitative direction. Can you choose the best line in practice, even if there isn't one in theory? Go.
So villain has probably range bet a board that's very good for his 3-betting range from the small blind. Then he checks. He could still be slow playing hands, so I don't think villain is capped. I don't think that check is capped at this SBR. I think they can be going for a check raise. So I think in this spot, I have aces. I have an ace that calls the flop in my range, and I think this is a hand that is probably prohibited as a bet.
Okay.
Because jacks, queens, and kings, they're the only things I can see in their range, which is some combos. There's 18 combos, so it may get folds from them, but are they really folding to one bet? Probably not. I'm probably gonna have to barrel again. And do I like barreling tens on an ace board? No. So I think it's probably, for me, it's prohibited.
I'm going to answer this myself now, and I only want you to focus on how long it takes me to do this, right? That's all I want you to focus on. This is an optional bet in GTO, and it's not a bluff. It's actually value denial. It's not really as a bluff. And in practice, people are under protecting their checking range and not check raising enough, and have too many, and under bluffing turns, so they have too many Broadway combos. So actually, I'm just going to pure make this bet. Done. 10 seconds, yeah? Yours is about a minute, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't need to start tracing people all the way from the flop here to answer that question. Yeah. But you do need to have a better sense of like why you'd be betting tens. Your hand is about 60% equity here, something like that. This is button blind, so it's a wide range configuration. Villain has king high, villain has broadways, villain has 8x sometimes that they've bluffed pre-flop and then c-bet flop with, and they have 9s as well, and they maybe have 7x, right? So there's plenty of worse hands that can call. They don't fold anything better, but that doesn't mean that you can't bet, because you're betting a hand with 60% equity. It can't be a bluff. If you're assessing your hand as a bluff, you must be being way too pessimistic about how much equity you have. So I think one skill we can work on a bit more is cut out all this stuff about like what's happened and what villain's done. It's true that you want to be aware of that, but the central question I asked you is like, is this a mandatory, optional, or prohibited bet? And you need to like start thinking about your actual hand and what it's worth here a bit faster if you have any hope of finding this in game, because in game you have like what, 10 seconds, 15, 20 maybe in a luxury.
With a bit of a time bank, but yeah.
So in game you really have to get to the point here of like what this hand is, because once you know that it's a value bet / denial bet and that it's optional, because 60% hands here, 65% hands, they'll be either optional or prohibited depending on how useful the fold equity is. So if you had kings here, I don't think there's any point in betting, but with tens, there's so much useful fold equity. Villain has 1 if not 2 overcards, almost always when they have air, that it is worth betting, and you can also get called by worse hands. So it is worth betting, and it's optional, but it becomes mandatory at the point where, exploitatively speaking, they're not checking enough ace-x, which I believe to be the case. Would you agree that the 50 NL pool on iPoker doesn't check enough ace-x? Would you like agree with that?
I would agree, yeah. I would say.
So you're fixating on this negative idea that they could be slow playing. It's almost like you want them to never be slow playing in order to bet here. You are so obsessed with losing money or avoiding losing money that it blinds you. You're so pessimistic when you're in a hand, especially a bigger pot, that you're calling like a 60% equity hand at bluff and stuff like that. There's an extreme underlying pessimism in your game, and I wonder if it comes from just the pain of being stacked as a losing poker player until now. You're breaking even for the first time now, right? You've been a losing poker player, you've been stacked, you've went through downswings, you've lost money, it's painful. I do wonder how much that stuff is like cat walking on stove here, and how much it's making these vague, pessimistic imprints on your assessments and actually stopping you solving spots. What do you think?
I think that's very possible, yeah. Because it is a concern. Like, my concern is that they're slow playing an ace here. So it's pessimism. It's not looking at the full picture.
You're in survival mode. You're trying to limit damage. You're trying to avoid hurt. And I get it. It's a natural human thing to do, to avoid hurt, especially in a game that does hurt you emotionally and psychologically. Poker does, right? Let's face it. But you can't play poker that way. You will get nowhere. You will run a red line that goes into the earth, into the center of the earth's core, and out the other side of the earth if you play that way and think that way. So let's start being objective and realistic about what our equity is. Our equity is plus 50% here. It has to be. Then we can figure out, do we want to make a thin value denial bet, or do we want to check? And that'll depend on the pool's tendencies, and the more combos like king queen they have here, and they have a lot of them because they actually over 3-bet that region compared to other stuff, the more we want to bet here. So this is a denial thin value bet I would make it full frequency at these stakes to exploit the fact that this range doesn't punish me enough for doing that. They're not trapping enough. They may be trapping, they're not trapping enough. That's what I care about. Easy check then. You see, their 3-bet ranges are completely malconstructed. They're linear. They have random hands in them they shouldn't have. That's another reason why you bet turn, because there's a big abundance of like king jack just playing this way that shouldn't be there at that frequency. Queen 10 of spades. We 3-bet and open from cutoff. We get peeled. 5-3 deuce. We go for a large c-bet, which I think is fine. Villain appears to be a reg. 23-20 over 267. We turn the queen. What's your assessment of, and again, I want you to cut all of this shit out about like he condensed blah blah blah. Like, I know that you know that, you don't need to repeat it, it's not going to help. I want you to assess your hand strength here. Go straight to your hand strength, quote me the equity, and then do an assessment of mandatory, optional, or prohibited when it comes to value betting this turn. Go for it.
Yeah, I would say equity 70% and mandatory bet, I would say. Or maybe in theory, probably because I'm out of position, it's an optional bet.
Yeah.
But against population who have condensed a lot, it's probably a bet.
Yeah, they've condensed a lot, and I don't trust them to bluff enough of the stuff that's like got a little bit of showdown here. So they're probably meant to like reopen sixes here as a sort of pseudo bluff, pseudo like denial bet sometimes and things like that. I think you've done a great job there. 70 is maybe even, yeah, it's about right actually. Like I was gonna say like 72, something like that, but I just bet like third pot here at this SBR and be happy with it. You could bet half pot as well, half pot, third pot, something like that. I think you should probably bet this hand. Most of their range is what sort of combo? Like if you had to say what do they have most often here, what would you say?
Pocket pairs between 5 and queen.
Because if you combo count, okay, like ace queen suited, 2 combos, king queen suited, 2 combos because they wouldn't have, sorry, 1 combo because they wouldn't have king queen of hearts calling flop. Queen jack suited, 1 combo. Queen 10 suited, 1 combo maybe if it calls pre. 6s, 6 combos, you know, 8s, 6 combos, 9s, 6 combos, 10s, 3 combos, jack, 6 combos. So you see what I'm doing. It's very pocket pair heavy, and I don't trust them to bet enough of that, and I don't think they're going to have enough natural bluffs on this card. Also, what about the fact that they're just not really meant to bet much here because the queen is so good for you? The queen is such a good card for your range that not only will they struggle to find like imaginative bluffs here, but they're also not meant to bet very often when you check to them. So you should definitely bet here. I think it's a better line. There's lots of spots that are theoretically indifferent, but they're mandatory bets in practice, and you're leaning too much towards them being checks. You are very guilty of not getting enough value, and while that's manifested in your red line, it's actually a blue line issue too. That you're not getting enough value. It's hurting both of your lines. Hurting the green line. So villain checks back here. Again, I'd like you to assess your hand, its equity, then assess what the best line is with that sort of hand against the pool's range in this spot. Much like you did on the turn.
I think my equity is high again. It's probably gone up, notwithstanding that the flush has come in because he didn't bet. Population will overbet 2 clubs on the turn.
Meaning bet it too frequently, yeah, just for their benefit.
Yes, we'll not leave any flush draws in their checking range.
I mean, that's a bit far, but yeah, I'm with you.
But I would say we're now maybe 80% equity.
So 9s gets there, some clubs come in. I guess it's still possible they have like ace queen that they've played a bit nittily on the turn. It's possible, but yeah, I think we're like 75% equity here. If you check, are they going to bluff enough in this node?
No.
They'll bluff turn, they're going to check back, they're condensed. So what do you have to do then?
Yeah, I need to bet. And this is where you've hit on a point that there's times when I find myself on the river out of position like this with a hand which has a good amount of equity. And I don't know whether I should bet or not. And I don't know I know it's an optional bet, but I don't know what the factors are that tell me that I should always be betting this.
So if it's an optional bet, I want you to, and you're not sure, I want you to defer to betting in this pool, because given the passivity of filtered ranges in general and how bad they are at bluffing often enough, on most spots, especially one where draws get there, you're not going to make money by checking hands like this and turning down a value bet. You know, you're not going to make more money by turning down this value bet than you are by making the value bet. So let's say if you are in doubt, you go ahead and you bet, okay? Like if you think it's close. Better yet would be to ask yourself, well, if I check, what is it I'm trying to do? I think you have the wrong idea about checking. When you check a hand this good, you actually have to hope that villain is over bluffing to make it okay, because you're not check folding this hand, you're check calling this hand. So there's no pot control here. That's not even a thing. It doesn't make sense. Like if you bet, you don't control the pot, but you don't want to control the pot, you want to get value. Pot control would actually stop you getting value. And if you bet, you get called, you get bluff called really often. You know, you have plenty of bluffs here, king 10, king 6, ace king, ace jack, jack 10. There's plenty of bluffs here still in your range. So absolutely you should bet this hand. I think block is like really standard here. I think you could also go up to about half pot here as well. Maybe you could even go larger, but I think like block or half pot is the right play. I'd go as far to say that this check is the epitome of why your red line is doing what it's doing. And what I might end up doing is when we wrap up for this season, I will just say to you, go off and fix this. And if you're betting in all of those spots, I know that when you come back for season 2 of this, or when we do a check-in sometime in the future, that this will be fixed and you'll be winning. I do think it will be. But this has
I
to
do
be
too,
fixed.
because I see it when the card comes. I'm instantly now feeling that's a bet. I've missed a bet, so I will spot that in future on the back of this. So I'm just wondering, is it again? There's an uncertainty about what to do, and I wonder, is it something? I know I should bet always in certain spots, but is it when villain has filtered somewhere in the hand, I should default then to betting? But if they if it's a wide range unfiltered, if they have lots of air, that's when I can mix. I'm not saying that I want to, but I'm just wondering whether it might make sense then to sometimes against a particular type of opponent to check in that scenario to let them.
Yeah. We're not saying it doesn't ever make sense to slow play out of position. Of course it does. It mainly makes sense against really aggressive people who have unfiltered ranges or ranges that are barely filtered. Like the last guy, if you knew that that guy had like king 5 in his range pre-flop in that first hand we looked at, and you knew that they just had all that shit and they were going to overbluff, then check's great. It's just that most people are really placid, and when the range is filtered and the board is making it hard for air to remain air, remember when they call flop, you say this yourself, you say villain is condensed, but you don't use that information properly. You're saying it yourself, like villain is moving away from having air, they're moving towards middling hands. Then if the board makes it even harder for air to exist because like flushes get there and stuff, and you have a 75% equity hand, you need to be betting, my friend. You must be betting, because if you don't, you just end up putting yourself in this like, I'm going to bluff catch against an underbluff line, and in the process turn down a value bet. And that's the issue. That's what we have to get on top of here.
No, that's great. Yeah, you're right. Like I'm seeing the answer, but I'm not making the connection. But this will help me do that, because it sort of gives me a protocol condensed. Okay, they're not going to bluff enough. I need to be value bet.
But don't fall back so hard on these words like condensed that you like stop thinking about your hand's value, your equity, the player type. You have to try and put it all together. The most important things are how good your hand actually is, and like whether it qualifies as a value bet or not, and then like the opponent type you're up against, any exploits or pool exploits. These are the most important things. The exact GTO of like how the spot goes, while it's something we strive to understand, it's not something that we have to recite in the middle of a hand every time. It's more of a sort of backbone of your understanding of your thought process. So I'll leave you with that thought for today. I do think we can fix this. We're going to do another few episodes, and we are going to pause, and I'm going to get a new student on for another YouTube series, guys, another series like this. And I'm going to send you off, Mark, when we do that. And I'm going to say, you know what to do. If you're in doubt, go back and watch the previous episodes, smashing the like button and commenting as you go, and remind yourself of the content and what we've talked about in this series, because I do believe that there'll come a point very soon where I say to you, look, I've given you the tools you need to fix this. Now it's up to you to go away and apply them and make sure that you switch yourself off to this leak and stop seeing things in terms of pot controller. I think like the big takeaway is uncertainty equals check. That's a very bad thought process. Uncertainty equals check. I'd rather you were independent about each spot spot and specific, but even uncertainty equals bet would be a better thought process than that. All right, closing statement from you.
I think where I'm at now versus 2 months ago is just like there's such a massive change.
I agree.
A massive upgrade. And I think this is the missing piece. I do believe you're right. And I feel it that even in game, I am sort of spotting afterwards that I've missed these spots. So they're on my radar, but I'm just not, I didn't have the protocol to make the connection in game. So I'm looking forward to getting it back on the tables and to see whether I can. Well, I know I can do this, so I'm confident that I'll get there. So I'll be out of your way soon.
Well, you'll be temporarily out of my way because I'm going to say to you, right, it's someone else's turn now to get their leaks all diagnosed and fixed, but you're coming back to this channel when you're winning because we are going to be cruising, and it doesn't matter if we take 3 months and send you off to go do it and then you come back with the cruising graph. You're going to come back here with a cruising graph, and this is how you're going to do it.
Yeah,
I don't care if it takes another 3 or 4 months. You're going to do it.
Yeah, I think this is the missing piece. So yeah, thanks a million. This has been, as always, this is great. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You guys know where to go for more content from me. It's carrotcorner.com for all of our courses, including Cash Injection, the course that'll be out from the 16th of December. You can go and watch the little countdown timer on that page until the next YouTube video comes out. That's how you should spend your time. And I will see you on the next one. And we'll be back soon with another couple of episodes of this before Mark goes off on his quest to get that winning graph. Until next time, bye for now.